This conference will now be recorded.
Parsha.
Boring Parsha?
This is a description of all the elements of.
Oh, no, that was last week's. And I beg to differ, it wasn't so boring. But this week is Parsha Tisa, page 484. This is an action-packed Parsha. An action-packed Parsha dealing with primarily the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf. However, since we've dealt with that extensively in the past, I'd like to focus on other aspects, especially a number of teachings that I'm having the time of my life learning the Orach Chaim this year. So I'd like to share with you some amazing insights of the Orach Chaim on psukim, on verses that we say all the time as part of our Shabbat Kiddush, actually. So things that we take for granted, and we get to see a whole different dimension. But let's begin with the beginning of Kitisa, page 484, Parsha Kitisa, Perek Lamed, Psukim Yud Aleph Yud Bet. And this is talking about, chapter 11, verses 11, we're going to start over there. I'm sorry, chapter 30. Okay. By the Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Ki Tisa et Rosh Bnei Yisroel Ifkudehem. When you will take the census, v'natnu ish kofer nafsho Hashem kodotam, lo yebem negev ifkodotam. Everyone should will give an atonement for his soul when they're being counted, and there will not be a negev. There will not be a plague amongst them. Now, this is, even though it's written before the Torah tells us of the Chet HaEgel, this was coming after the Chet HaEgel, after the sin of the golden calf. And this tally is being taken. Everyone is giving this machatzit hashekel. Machatzit hashekel is a half of a shekel. Everyone gave that, and that is going for the adanim. The adanim were the sockets made of silver into which the krashim, the upright beams comprising the walls of the Mishkan, they were each had these two pegs coming from the bottom that would go into these adanim, these sockets. This everyone contributed to. Whereas the different parts of the Mishkan, that was everyone gave what they felt they could, what they wanted to give, but everyone had to give towards these adanim. The adanim are the sockets that the upright krashim posts went into. This was the foundation of the Mishkan. And every single Jew needed to have their chelek, their portion in this foundation.
So it's not just the man of the tribe, even the child?
No, from age 20 and up, right? Now, the pasuk there says, if you look in the Hebrew, v'natnu, on the second line, right? The third word, v'natnu. The Balaturim points out, v'natnu, and they shall give, is it called a palindrome? I think it's a palindrome. You read it front to back to front, it is the same. V'natnu. So the word for giving is a palindrome. V'natnu, as we discussed previously on Parshas Truma, I also discussed it on Shabbos, that when we give, we are actually getting more than we are giving. The Gemara says that the poor person gives to the rich person more than the rich person is giving to the poor person. The rich person is giving to the poor person some funds. Very good. The poor person is giving the rich person an opportunity to change his midot, to become a more giving, caring, generous person. God is the epitome of the giver. The more when we give, we become more godlike. That is our full eternity, as godlike as we can become in this world. That will determine the connection we will have with God in the world to come. And as we actually discussed yesterday in our Chovos HaLevavos class, I think it was there, that the only thing that one actually gets and has for eternity is that which one gives away. I told the story then of a very, very wealthy donor back in the 1920s who had given a fantastic sum of $25,000 in the 1920s. So what's that actually worth? So a person who's involved in the stock market said, well, the way the stock market moves, that's worth about $25 million today in today's world. Someone who's more involved in the banking world was looking at interest considerably less than that. But either way, we're talking about a very, very incredible donation. Then this person, the depression struck. This person lost everything, all the real estate. He ended up living in the basement of one of the buildings that he used to own. Okay, and when the yeshiva came collecting again the next year, the yeshiva offered to help this person out, to give him back $5,000 to help him out, right? Because he's in such dire straits. He had been so generous. Now he was in need. The yeshiva wanted to give him back, to which he indignantly replied, I've lost everything. Do you want me to also lose the merit of the tzedakah that I have given? Do you want me to lose that also? Absolutely not. The only thing that we do have is that which we no longer have, that which we give away for a good purpose, for a holy purpose, for kedusha, for holiness, whatever way that might be, helping a poor person, an institution, whatever it might be. That is yours for eternity. V'natnu, and you shall give. V'natnu. It is a two-way street. Whenever we give, we're actually gaining more than that which we are giving. And what are we supposed to give? If you look again on the fourth line in the middle of the line, there, machatzit hashekel. Mem chet tzadi yud taf. Machatzit, a half of that shekel. So again, the Vilna Gaon here sees things that we don't see, and he was good enough to share it with us. Machatzit. Look at the word machatzit, which means the half shekel that one is given. It's a fascinating construct. If you look at the first and last letter, mem and taf, what does that spell? Mate. What is mate? Death, dead. And you look, that's letters numbers 1 and 5. Look at letters numbers 2 and 4. What do you have? Chet, yud, which spells Chet yud, chai, which means life. What's the middle letter? Tzadi or tzadik. That is the tzedakah that we're discussing over here. That is I hate to use the word charity, because charity has this connotation of the great magnanimous me is deeming you worthy of being a recipient of my charity, right? The word charity in tzedakah comes from the root word tzedek, righteousness. We discussed that it is a righting of the balance, Raghdting, a correcting of the balance, meaning that God gave me more than I need and gave you less than you need, and then it's upon me to correct that imbalance, to make it tzedek. So tzedakah, the tzadi stands for tzedakah, tzedek, tzedakah in the middle. And we have a concept that if a person is close to tzedakah, the pasuk says in Mishlei in Proverbs, tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Tzedakah saves from death. Tzedakah tatzil mimavet. So if a person is close to tzedakah, that person is chai. That person is alive. If a person is far from tzedakah, then that person is mate. The two letters closest to the tzadi, chai. The two letters furthest from the tzedakah are mate, are death. And as we always say, if I'm giving, then I am becoming a giver. I'm becoming godlike. And the only way that a person can have eternity is by connecting ourselves to that which is eternal, connecting ourselves to Hashem, then the Torah, that is eternal, and that is how we are chai. That is how we are truly chai, truly alive. Not just talking about alive in this world, where we are continuously getting weaker and weaker, but chai in a netzach, in an eternal manner. Okay, so that is how the parsha begins with the machatzit hashekel, and then it discusses the kior, which where they would wash, the kohanim would wash their hands and feet, and then the anointing oil, and then the incense, and then chapter 31, page 488. I have called by name Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor lamate Yehuda. I have called by name Betzalel, the son of Uri, the son of Chor, of the tribe of Yehuda. I have filled him with this Ruach Elokim, this godly spirit, page 490. The Chachma B'Tvuna B'Das U'B'Chol Melacha. With Chachma, Tvuna, and Da'at, with wisdom and understanding and knowledge, B'Chol Melacha. Those words, Chachma, Bina, and Dat, actually are when we're speaking in Kabbalistic terms of the 10 Sfirot, the three highest levels are Chachma, Bina, and Dat, and that's where the Lubavitcher Hasidim get their acronym of Chabad from, that the Chachma, Bina, V'dat, and he's going to be doing all of this work, and along who will be his sidekick, and then Pasuk Vav, verse 6, this artisan work. Verse 6, and I've given along with him Ahaliav ben Achisamach Lamate Dan, of the tribe of Dan. Interesting. So you have Betzalel from the tribe of Judah, Yehuda, which is the most prominent of the tribes, the tribe from which kingdom comes. And you also have Eliav from the tribe of Dan. Dan was one of the tribes of one of the Shvachot, one of the maidservants who was married to Yaakov, to Jacob. And this speaks of the meritocracy of Judaism. The meritocracy. Who is it that rises to the top? Whoever has that merit, whoever is deserving of it. We're going to see that it was not Moshe's sons who became the leaders after him. It was Yehoshua. It is the person who is deserving of it. I mentioned before that famous story of the great sage Hillel, when he was a pauper and was not yet the great sage Hillel, and he couldn't afford the fee to enter the Beit Midrash, and he went up onto the roof and was listening to the shiur, and ended up getting frozen there overnight. The next morning they come to the Beit Midrash, they come to the study hall, and they see the form of a person by the skylight, and they run up there and they bring him down, and they're Machalel Shabbos, they desecrate the Shabbos in order to heat up water for him, in order to keep him alive. That was Hillel. And whose class was he coming to hear? Shemaiah and Avtalion, who were either they themselves Gerim or descendants of Gerim. Converts, sorry. Right? So we have what we call a meritocracy. And the pasuk says over here, Uveleiv kol chacham leiv natati chachma, there in verse 6. and into the heart of every wise-hearted person I've given wisdom. So Hashem gives the wisdom to those who seek that wisdom, right? Im shamoa tishma'u. If you listen, then you will listen. We say in the Shema every day. We make that first effort to try to become chachamim, to try to understand, to try to learn, and that's when then the blessing and the siyata dishmaya, meaning the help from heaven, guiding us in that direction, that is when that comes along. Yes, Cheryl.
You mentioned Dan, the tribe. When I was reading the Midrash says, it was talking about how I was reading about Amalek, and it said that Amalek attacked that whole tribe. So I wanted to know more about that.
Yeah, so Dan were the ones who were traveling in the back. So therefore, they were the ones who absorbed that attack.
But did they deserve that then?
Huh?
Because I thought it was just like the week and.
Yeah. So perhaps according to that measurement, it was the week of Dan. I'm not sure. So over here on page 490, we're discussing the construction of that Mishkan, and then we interrupt our regular programming with verses 12, 13. Hashem said to Moshe saying, speak to the Bnei Yisroel, saying, Ach et Shabtotai tishmaru. However, page 490, 491, verse 12. Hashem said to Moses saying, Daber, speak to Bnei Yisrael, saying, Ach et Shabtotai tishmaru, but, however, my Shabtotai you shall observe, ki ot he, this is a sign, beini uveinechem, between me and you, l'dorotechem, for all generations, ladat, that you will know, ki ani Hashem, that I, God, mikadishchem, I am the one who makes you holy. So we interject our Mishkan over here with Shabbos. And this is something that we have throughout the Torah. Mishkan and Shabbat always are going hand in hand. And we know the teachings of the Torah Shebaal Peh, of the oral Torah teaching, that on Shabbat we are supposed to abstain from the 39 milachot, the 39 creative activities. God stopped creating. God did not rest on the seventh day. Rest connotes weariness. God did not get tired. God did not rest on the seventh day. God stopped creating on the seventh day. And that is the way that we do our observance. We do our belief in God as a creator. That comes the seventh day, we desist from creative activities. Turning on a light is not something that tires me out. I don't need to rest from hitting a light switch. But turning on a light is showing my domination over nature, over the world, and altering the world to fit my needs. That is creative activity, and that is what we desist from on Shabbos. Now, how do we get our list of the 39 malachot, these 39 creative activities from which we must cease to do on Shabbat? And that is, we look at the Mishkan, we look at the tabernacle, and we look at the malacha, the different work, creative activity that went into the building of that tabernacle, and that is what we then abstain from. And that is derived from the constant proximity in the Torah of Mishkan and Shabbat. Shabbos, creation, is God making a place in his world for us. That's what creation was. In Kabbalistic terms, we say the world was in a state of atzilut. Atzilut is pure godliness. Nothing existed besides that. And then God created what we call a halal, a void, wherein his presence is not overwhelming. It's there, but we could also deny it. That is the halal, this void that it created. So he created a place in his world where we can exist, and that is planet Earth. And it's fascinating. We see this, that, you leave the confines of planet Earth, right? You go into an airplane, and all of a sudden you need a pressurized cabin, because all of a sudden we're leaving the confines of the place that God created wherein we can exist. Go further up away from Earth into space, and you need a whole space suit. You need all these things. So God created a place, a space in his world where we can exist, and therefore we reciprocate with Mishkan. Mishkan is the tabernacle. We carve out a space in this world for God to exist, so to speak. And that's why in the Mishkan we have all these different laws that don't apply elsewhere, of Tumah and Tara, purity and impurity, sacrifices, all that's going on. That is a whole different world. That is how we reciprocate. So on the base level, Shabbos and Mishkan are always coupled together in order to teach us that the malacha, the Torah says, don't do malacha, right? Malacha is that creative activity, but it does not define what that is. But the Torah does define it by putting the smichut, by putting it back to back, Shabbat, and Mishkan, and the Torah Shebaal Peh, the explanation that God gave to Moses, elucidates that further into those 39 malachot. Yes, Esther.
So I was just thinking about, Hashem is limitless. He's eternal, he's limitless, but he limited himself. I mean, he retracted part of himself to create a place for us. And so it just occurred to me that, in a sense, on Shabbat, we limit ourselves too. So
Nice.
in a sense, that's like another act that's similar to God, is our limitation.
Yeah. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes.
It's called Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum. Yes.
Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum is the Kabbalistic term that's used for God containing, limiting himself, filtering his presence, and it doesn't come down in full force. Yeah. Beautiful. Now, Rashi points out, the Torah says, again, this is verse 12 or 13, and now speak to Bnei Yisrael, saying, Ach et Shabtotai tishmaru. However, my Shabbat tishmaru. That's how the English translates it. Verse, page 491, verse 13. Now you speak the children of Israel, saying, Ach, translated, however, you must observe my Sabbaths. Right? So the way Rashi understands, Ach comes to limit. That word ach, English translated as however, comes to limit. So Rashi understands this as follows. Even though you're going to be full of energy, full of excitement about building this Mishkan, however, my Sabbaths you shall observe, right? Don't think that will override Shabbat, and I'm allowed to do the building of the Mishkan even on Shabbat. No. However, my Shabbats that you shall observe. That's how Rashi learns it. The only issue that some of the commentators bring up is Ach comes to limit. Et Shabtotai, my Sabbaths. So the limitation from the structure of the verse seems to be going not on limit your building of the Mishkan because of Shabbat, but it's referring to a limitation of Shabbat itself. So even though you're supposed to keep Shabbat, there are times that you are not supposed to keep Shabbat. And he sees this as the source for the halacha, the well-known halacha that we have, that when it comes to pikuach nefesh, when it comes to saving someone's life, then we don't observe the Shabbat. We will break the Shabbat, so to speak, in order to tend to this person and save that person's life. And he points out, it says, Ach et Shabtotai. Shabtotai is my Sabbaths in the plural. So on one hand, that's referring to all the days that are called Shabbat, whether it is the seventh day of the week, Shabbat, whether it is Yom Kippurim, that's referred to as Shabbat, whether it is Shabbat Shabbaton, or whether it is the other holidays, all of those we will desecrate in order to save someone's life. However, he says, Ciner, don't use that word desecrate. You're not desecrating Shabbat when you break Shabbat, so to speak, in order to save someone's life. Right? Ein ze karui chilul, he says. That's not called desecrating. Adarab, on the contrary, ze karui shmirat Shabbat. That is called keeping Shabbat. When we break Shabbat to save someone's life. Ach et shabtotai tishmoru. The Gemara says that we should break a Shabbat to save someone's life, and that way that person will observe many Shabbatot going forward. Okay? And therefore realize et shabtotai tishmoru. By that limitation, by that limiting of the Shabbat, you're actually expanding the Shabbat. You're adding to the Shabbat. The Shabbat grows as there's more Shabbat as a result. Then he says, why? Ki oti beini v'nechem l'dorotechem. That is a sign between me and you for generations. La da'at. That you will know, ki ani Hashem mekadishchem. That I am Hashem who is mekadishchem, who sanctifies you. Then he says one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. He says as follows. Realize, Shabbat has Kedusha. Right? Shabbat has holiness. If you're breaking Shabbos to save a life, what does that show me? The nefesh, the life, is greater. The holiness of a soul is greater than the holiness of Shabbat. And therefore, it's perfectly logical. Which will get pushed aside for enough, which will get pushed aside for which? The less holy will be pushed aside for the more holy. So the less holy Shabbat gets pushed aside for the greater holiness of this Jewish soul. And that's why it says, Ladat, from this teaching, that you will break Shabbat to save a life, you will know, Ki ani Hashem mikadishchem, that I am the one who sanctifies you. That you have a greater Kedusha than Shabbat. Now, let's play this out for a moment. When it comes to Shabbat, we're so careful to give it the proper time. Right? We start Shabbat a little bit early. We end Shabbat a little bit later. We're so careful to give Shabbat its proper time. So how about when we're speaking to a person, we're dealing with a person, how careful we should be to give that person their due. A while ago, I noticed that often when I'm talking to somebody, I start to shift away because I'm ready to move on. And I realize that's kind of disrespectful. As long as I'm talking to the person, let me be full on, right? When it's time to go, that's when I can turn. But give the person right? Their due, their respect. There's a mitzvah of kavod Shabbat. We're supposed to honor the Shabbat. Honor the Shabbat in the way that we talk, in the way that we walk, in the way that we deal with it. So if the soul of a person, Ki ani Hashem mikadishchem, I am Hashem who sanctifies you, if that's the soul of a person, so let's make sure the way we walk, the way we talk, the way we deal with them is with that kedusha, that recognition that their kedusha is greater than that of even Shabbat. And then we continue. Ushmartem et Shabbat, right? You should observe the Shabbat, verse 14. Verse 15, 6 days, yeyasem melacha, 6 days that you will do melacha, uvayom hashvi'i, and the 7th day, Shabbat Shabbaton, Kodesh LaHashem. It is a Shabbat of Shabbats, meaning, the commentators explain that there are certain days that are referred to as Shabbat, like the holidays, where we're allowed to do certain malacha, certain things. For example, on Yom Tov, we're allowed to cook. But by Shabbat and by Yom Kippur, where we're not allowed to cook, what does it call it? Shabbat, Shabbaton, right? It is that Shabbat, Shabbaton. And then Pasuk Tet Zayin should sound 16, should sound very familiar. V'shamru b'nei Yisroel et Shabbat lasa, or V'shamru b'nei Yisroel es HaShabbos, as we sing it at our Kiddush every Shabbos day. And the children of Israel should observe the Shabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat l'dorotam Brit Olam, to make the Shabbat Lidorotam, for generations, a Brit Olam, an eternal covenant. Now, this is a pasuk that we say so often, right? And the Orach Chaim gives us all these different added understandings in this. Now, there's a famous story that's told in the Gemara of Megillah. And we discuss this when it comes time for the fast of the 10th of Tevet, where we say that there are 3 reasons behind that fast. One of them is that's the day when the siege began on Jerusalem, which years later led to the breaching of the walls. 3.5 years later, the breaching of the walls, and then 3 weeks after that, the destruction, the burning of the temple. So one reason we fast on the 10th day of the month of Tevet, that's the shortest fast day of the year. It comes out right after Hanukkah, December time, typically January time. A second reason is that's the yahrzeit, the passing of Ezra, who's the one who led us into Israel for the building of the second temple, the second commonwealth. I just heard a very, very nice tidbit on a shiur I was listening to. Right, so we say Hashem is Ozer u'Moshia in the Amidah. Sometimes we say God is Ozer, He helps, and He is Moshia, and He saves. Now, who led us into Israel? Yehoshua, the first one, and Ezra, the second one, which is Ozer u'Moshia. You have Yehoshua, the root word is Yeshua, is redemption, saving, and you have Ezra, the root word is Ozer. There's a fascinating tidbit that I heard in a shiur.
I didn't get it. The first time part Yeshua,
the name. Well,
what's the meaning of the name?
Yes, Ezra comes from the root word Ozer, which is to help, right? And Yehoshua comes from the root word Moshia, which is to save.
Okay, and Ezra, the meaning of the Ezra.
Ezra is the person. Ezra is to help. Right, and we say about God, He's Ozer, He helps, U'Moshia, and He saves, U'Magen, and He protects. And so Hashem is Ozer, Moshia, and He sent Ezra and Yehoshua each time to lead us into the land of Israel. But the Gemara writes, but a third reason why we fast on that day is because that is the day that Yanai the king took 70 elders, put them into 70 different rooms, and told them to translate the Torah into Greek. And he didn't want them to collaborate, and he was looking to find fault in the Torah, and they had to make adjustments in order that he would not use the Torah to slander us, to slander God. And miraculously, they all made the same exact translation, and that is known today as the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Torah. However, right, so that was a calamitous day, a reason for a fast day, one of the three reasons why we fast. Well, what's the calamity? Isn't that what Art Scroll does? Here, we're all sitting here with the Art Scroll Stone edition of the Torah, right? Art Scroll has translated it. What's wrong with translating the Torah, right? We want the Torah to be translated in order that everyone can access it. Yes, Cheryl?
Well, it's because of the intention.
Good. So the intent of this Yana HaMelech was to strip the Torah down to make it a storybook. And there is the Reader's Digest, condensed Bible. Right? Well, yeah, who needs all this extra stuff in there?
But they were looking to condemn the Jews.
Yes. That's why that was a calamity. Why is it okay when Art Scroll does it? Because they're doing it in order to avail it to Judaism, to the worldwide Jews, not all of whom are so comfortable with Hebrew, believe it or not. Right? Can you imagine that? Yeah?
It's too late for me to learn because of the Hebrew. But it's such.
Same for us.
But I feel how you have to have Hebrew to understand.
Yes. And granted that Art Scroll is doing it in order to avail Torah to the masses, but at the same time, what happens is it does get stripped down. And that's why I want to share with you how the Or HaChaim takes this pasuk of Vishamru B'nei Yisrael to Shabbat and gives us all of these different levels of understanding that you can't have in a simple translation. If you keep the place over here, but if you look back into Bereshit on page, I'm finding it 1 second.
In my next slide, can I have a request to God to send me to be born in an observant family and to be frum from birth and then Hebrew from childhood, not to be born in a non-observant family?
Yeah, well, but maybe then you wouldn't have the enthusiasm you have right now.
Yeah.
I don't have enough enthusiasm.
Well,
You know,
can never have enough.
at least I would have given the basics. I would have given the knowledge.
think for
You can always come back, you know. You can
But
always
you're working at it now, and you're connecting yourself now, and that's worth its weight in gold, Allah. That's worth its weight in gold. So back in Vayeshev, on page 200, this is where Joseph is having his dreams. He had the first dreams, tells his brothers of all the sheaves bowing down to him, right? And the brothers are angry, they're jealous, they hate him for his words. He had the next dream, verse 9, and he tells that to his brothers, right? And they don't interpret it. And this one was the 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowing down to him. Verse 10, he tells it to his father, chapter 37, verse 10. He told his fathers and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and he said, Ma, what is this dream that you have dreamt? Will I, your mother and your brothers come to bow down to you on the ground? The brothers were jealous. Va'aviv shamar et hadavar. But his father literally guarded the word. But what does it mean? The English says kept it in mind. Rashi says hayamamtinu mitzapeh. He was waiting and hoping Matai yavo, when will that come about? Right, to see the elevation of Yosef. He was waiting and hoping and longing for it to happen. So what does shamar mean? Longing, waiting, hoping. To which the Or HaChaim says, Vishamru v'nei Yisroel et HaShabbat. The children of Israel should shamru, not simply guard, observe. What should we do? We should long. We should look forward to. We should await that Shabbat. That's Vishamru v'nei Yisroel et HaShabbat. Comparing it to his father, Mamtin, Umitzapeh, waiting, hoping, when will it come? Meaning, don't look at Shabbat as a davar toreach, as a burden. Oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't check my phone, I can't go onto the internet, I can't watch the TV, I can't go to the movies, I can't go to the beach, I can't. Don't look at Shabbat as that. Rather, we should be rejoicing. When will it come? Right? TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. Shabbos is about to come. La'asot et HaShabbat. To do the Shabbat, meaning don't look forward to it that, oh, I get to sleep late. During the week, davening here is 6:30. My alarm goes off, at least the first time, at 5:40. Keeps going off a number of other times. On Shabbos, I get to sleep until 8 o'clock, 8:15, right? And, on Shabbos, I got great food. We have our Kiddush teams over here doing great stuff. Natalie doing great stuff, right? That's not why we should be looking forward to it, but because of La'asot et HaShabbat, for the beauty of what Shabbat offers us. And I always say, with my old phone, which used to make sounds when I would turn it off, I used to love Friday, just turning it down and just being able to disconnect from all of these electronic leashes that we have. And, we say Shabbos is Me'ein Olam Haba. It's a taste of the world to come. And that it's a time where we can disconnect from all of the worries that we have, all the dealings that we have. Vishamru v'nei Yisroel et HaShabbat. We need to be looking forward to that Shabbat. Another explanation that he gives is la'asot et HaShabbat, to do the Shabbat, to make the Shabbat. Realize the ability that we have. We light the candles. We bring in Shabbat. It might still be light outside, but all of a sudden we can make the Shabbat, right? The holiness of Shabbat. We light the candles. Now it is Shabbat. God gave us the ability to bring in Shabbat. We don't yet make Havdalah. We extend the Shabbat. We have this ability that we are Oseh Shabbat Mamash, right? We are making Shabbat. We are creating. We're bringing that spirituality into the world, bringing that spirituality into ourselves. Another point that he makes is la'asot. We might think shamru, we're observing Shabbat, meaning we are abstaining from all those things. But by doing that, that's not considered simply abstaining. That's considered doing. La'asot et HaShabbat. We have a teaching, the person sits and doesn't do an aveira, doesn't do a sin, that person receives reward as if they did a mitzvah. Oh, so that's great. So I sleep now 12 hours a night. I'm not doing any averot. I got 12 hours of mitzvot, right? Is that how it works? Right? No, not really. what it means is biba'a avera liyado v'lo avar. When the opportunity came before me and I didn't do it, right? So if I don't speak lashon hara, I'm getting a mitzvah of, right? That's not when I'm asleep. It's when I have something juicy that I'm tempted to say, and I bolem piv, and I lock my mouth down, and I don't say it. That's when I get the tremendous reward. So the reward for not doing an Aveira, and it's as if you actively did a mitzvah, is when the opportunity comes before you. And he says, well, let's look at Shabbos. Every moment we've got all these opportunities of malacha, of these creative activities, right, that we're not supposed to do, and we need to do our tzimtzum. We need to restrain ourselves. That's constantly happening. All the laws of Shabbos are always there in front of us, and therefore that's considered as if you are doing a mitzvah. Then he gives another explanation. Olam haba, the world to come, is referred to Yom Shekulo Shabbat, the day that's all Shabbat. The same way that on Shabbat over here we shed our earthly responsibilities, Olam haba is the day that's completely the shedding of these earthly responsibilities. It's Yom Shekulo Shabbat. And therefore, Vishamru v'nei Yisroel et Shabbat, if the Bnei Yisroel will observe the Shabbat, la'asot lahen, la'asot et haShabbat. That will make that Shabbat, right? That is how one gets a taste of the world to come, right? By keeping Shabbat, what are you doing? You are creating Shabbat. You're creating the world to come right here on this earth. And then that will be le Brit Olam. And that is what will give you that eternal covenant. That is what gives you that eternity of the world to come. So he understands now saying, Vishamru, Bnei Yisrael will observe the Shabbat, La'asot et Shabbat, bringing that Shabbat, bringing that Olam Haba into this world, bringing that world to come into this world, into our lives, into our families, into our community. And that then becomes this Brit Olam, this eternal covenant. And then he says, and yes, Cheryl.
So I often hear that the things on earth are a reflection of what is in Shemayim. And this sounds exactly like what this is.
Exactly right. Yeah. Say it again, Cheryl.
Can you say it in English, please?
Yeah, that what happens in this world is a reflection of what's going on in the spiritual world, right? And Shabbat is a reflection of that Olam Haba that glimmers here into this world. Yes.
You know, there are people who, let's say, artists, who composers. For them, it's not work to compose. It's just part. They can't live without it. Or painters who paint, they can't live without. It's not work. So it's a punishment for the world to come. For the
it's creativity.
Yeah.
So I know it's creativity.
So you're saying it's a punishment that they can't do it on Shabbos, or the world to come will be a punishment.
On Shabbos, it's a small punishment, and the world to come, it's a big punishment.
Okay. So again, on Shabbos, the way that we show our belief in God as a creator is by stopping to create, stopping to change the world. And what's the expression? Slow down and smell the roses, right? To stop trying to do more and more and more. But even David Foreman gives a great example of an artist, right? An artist who's doing their beautiful painting. If they keep going and going and going and going, what happens? The whole easel collapses under the weight of all that oil on the canvas. At a certain point, you need to stop, step back, and appreciate what there is, right? And that was Hashem on Shabbos, stepping back and not continuing to alter the world, but to step back and say, this is the world, right? And on Shabbat also, on Shabbos, it's time for us to stop looking to change, stop looking to do more, right? And this is the world of doing. And that is why, right, it's called the Olam HaAsiyah, the world of doing. And that's why we have this energy, this drive to do and do and do. The world to come, right? And for us, like, what am I going to do all day? I'm going to go crazy over there, right? That's taking, and that's valid what you're saying, Allah. But that's taking our present mindset and thinking that that's what's going to be over there. But that's not what's going to be over there. And I had a beautiful, beautiful, sweet, sweet little girl who started asking me questions like, how can it be, right, that in the world to come, how can we live without our hearts? How can we live without all these things, right? Right? And I gave her two approaches. One approach is what I've mentioned here before. You can look it up. Go to YouTube. Conversations in the Womb, which is a beautiful song based on a medrash of two twins talking in the womb. One of them thinking that there's life after birth, and the other one saying, no, this is it. This is all what you see is what you get. Conversations in the Womb.
That's on YouTube?
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. Conversations in the Womb. Huh? Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And right, the parable is they're discussing, is there a world after? And then right, and of course they're just in their whole purpose of being is to prepare themselves for life after birth. And that's how we too, we have our world, we're in the womb over here. And this whole purpose is to prepare us for life after death, life after birth. And that's why we don't call death, we call it Gesher HaChaim, we call it the bridge of life, bring us to the next stage. And the same way that the kids in the womb can't imagine what life will be outside the womb, so too, right, we, well, I swim in outside there, no umbilical cord. What am I going to do? Where will I get my sustenance, my oxygen, my nutrition, right? So too, we get locked into our mindset here and think that the next world will be hell without the things that drive us here, right? But it's a whole different existence. The other example I gave is the butterfly, right? That it starts off as a worm of sorts, caterpillar, what's the correct term? Caterpillar, right? And then it goes into this, get the word for it? Yeah, larva, right? And then out comes this butterfly that then goes flying, spreading its majestic wings, right? Imagine telling the caterpillar, you see the butterfly? That's going to be you. I'll say, yeah, right. Rub it in, buddy, right? And so we can't take our existence here and send that forward. But then one last point that he says, that at least he says more of, I'll share, is that Shabbos is also the name of the neshama yetera. The neshama yetera means that extra soul, that extra spirituality that we are given here in this world when Shabbos comes. And that's why we have the spices after Shabbos to try to help us maintain our balance, because we just lost that extra soul of Shabbos. So it's like giving someone the smelling salts. So that's what we say, V'sham b'nei Yisrael ta Shabbat, Guard that Shabbat. Guard that neshama yetera. Guard that extra soul. It's come to you from the other world, and therefore create an environment in your Shabbos that it will feel at home. And that's why we're told that it's important how you talk on Shabbos, how you walk on Shabbos, right? Guard that Shabbat. Give it a chance. Give it an environment that will be beautiful for it. And that way, la'asot et Shabbat l'dorotam. And that way, you'll be able to have that Shabbat l'dorotam, right? That time where all generations will gather together. Where do all generations gather together? That is in the world to come. So therefore, Shamru, guard that Shabbat. So this, I thought, was a beautiful example about how the translation in any language, even the Art Scroll, it gives you an outline, it gives you a bare bone, right? It's great. We have to make things accessible, available to all. But when it's in Lashon HaKodesh, when it's in Hebrew, that's when you have layer upon layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of beauty, of teachings, of understandings.
That's
Okay.
what we yearn for.
Yeah. Layers and layers. Yeah.
Understanding those layers.
Yeah. And that's why I'm having a grand old time with the Orach Chaim this year. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Esther.
I have a question about the extra soul on Shabbos.
Yeah.
It's probably a stupid question.
No stupid questions.
Do we get the same soul each Shabbos, or do we like entertain a different soul? I mean,
It's an extra visitor. We have our soul, and then we have this.
Is it like this
neshama.
week it's going to be that?
Oh, is it the
and
same
this
one?
week- yeah.
Oh.
The same one.
I have no idea.
Stump the rabbi.
I have no idea.
I know, it's interesting.
David Foreman, that's
Yes.
Foreman.
FOHRMAN.
Does FOHR? Does he have like audio classes or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have to subscribe to them?
Yes.
Well, for some you do, for some you don't.
And how do you just David?
No, go to Aleph ALEPH.
ALEPH
Aleph Beta BETA.org. Okay, as I said, the next 2 weeks I won't be here, but we're going to be learning, right?
And Thursday you'll be here.
This Thursday I'm here, right? We're getting together though, but you will get together as a group, also online, and Ray will have his thing all set up. He'll be here. Physically here. I'm writing to Judy Yehuda right now.
I went to Israel.
No, I'm not going to Israel.